He didn't stop to think. He didn't stop to pray. He just ran straight toward a car that was already on fire. While everyone else stood frozen on the sidewalk, phones raised. Recording. Robert Calloway dropped his briefcase, loosened his tie, and sprinted into the smoke. He didn't know whose daughter was inside that car. He didn't know that pulling her out would cost him the only future he had left. And he sure didn't know that 6 weeks later, the woman whose child he saved would look him dead in the eyes and ask the one question that would break him open completely. What he said next, she never forgot. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if it moves you, hit subscribe. Every single story on this channel is made for people who still believe that doing the right thing matters. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning. Not because Robert Calloway needed it. He hadn't slept past 4 in almost 3 years. Sleep had become something he gave himself in pieces. 90 minutes here, 2 hours there, the way a man rations the last of his food when he doesn't know when more is coming. He lay still for a moment in the dark, staring at the water stain on the ceiling above his bed. He'd been meaning to fix it for 8 months. He kept a mental list like that, a long, silent list of things he would get to someday. When there was finally enough money, enough time, enough breathing room to stop surviving and start living. Someday he sat up, put both feet on the cold floor, and got to work. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen where the third burner on the stove had stopped working in February. Robert had learned to cook around it. He'd learned to cook around a lot of things. He moved quietly through the dark, the way a man moves when he's spent years protecting someone else's sleep. He started the coffee. He cracked 4 eggs. He cut the bread the real kind, not the cheap sandwich loaf, because Chloe had a texture thing. She always had, and he'd stopped buying the wrong bread about 2 years ago without ever making a big deal out of it. Some lessons you just absorbed. He could hear her breathing through the wall. She was still asleep. 11 years old, and she slept the way children sleep when they feel safe, heavy, and deep, and completely surrendered to it. That sound was the one thing in Robert Calloway's life that was entirely, unconditionally good. He stood in the kitchen with his coffee and listened to it. Then he looked at the calendar on the refrigerator. 14 days. That was how long he had before Chloe's next immunotherapy treatment. The number was circled in red marker, surrounded by smaller numbers he'd written in pencil, the cost of the treatment, the current balance of his savings account, the difference between those 2 figures. He did this math every morning, not because he enjoyed it, because it reminded him why he was still standing. The difference was $2,400 he did not have. Not yet, but today was going to change that. Robert worked 2 jobs. Daytime, he drove a forklift at a regional distribution warehouse, 42 hours a week, union hourly, decent enough pay. Nights and weekends, he picked up delivery shifts for a grocery app, loading his beaten Ford Escape with other people's groceries and driving them to houses he could never afford to live in. He was good at both jobs. More than good. His warehouse supervisor, a stout, no-nonsense woman named Dolores, had once told him he was the most reliable man on the floor. "You're the guy I'd want next to me in a foxhole, Robert," she'd said. "That's a weird thing to say to a forklift operator," he'd told her. She'd laughed. "You know what I mean," he did. But reliable didn't mean comfortable. Reliable meant he showed up. Reliable meant the bills got paid, barely, every month. Reliable meant Chloe got her treatments and her medications and the special orthopedic pillow she needed because of the way her spine curved slightly to the left. A side effect of the immune disorder that her specialist had monitored for 2 years, without alarm, but with a careful, watchful expression that Robert had memorized and hated. Reliable was not enough anymore. He needed more, which was why, 3 weeks ago, his warehouse supervisor had put his name forward for a floor manager position. A real promotion. Not a title bump, a full reclassification. Salaried. Benefits package. Medical coverage that would finally pay for Chloe's treatments at a rate that wouldn't require him to choose between her medication and the electricity bill. The interview was today. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he had pressed his one good shirt the night before and hung it on the bathroom door so it would be ready. He had written out notes, talking points, about his 5 years at the company. The efficiency systems he'd developed on his own. The way he'd reorganized the north loading dock to cut fulfillment time by 11 minutes per cycle. He had read those notes 3 times before bed. He was ready. Dad, he turned. Chloe was standing in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair a magnificent disaster on one side. She was small for her age. The immune disorder had affected her growth. Another thing the specialist monitored. Another thing Robert absorbed and moved around without making a big deal of it. But her eyes were large and dark and completely alert, even at 5 in the morning. She got that from him. "You're up early," he said. "I heard you thinking," she said. "You think loud." "Sorry." She came over and sat at the kitchen table, pulling her knees to her chest the way she always did. She looked at the calendar on the refrigerator. She looked at him. "Is today the interview?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. 9 o'clock. "You're wearing the blue jacket? That's the plan." She nodded slowly, processing this. "Then, Dad, you're going to get it." He looked at her. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do," she said. "You're the best person I know. And you're really, really good at the forklift." He almost laughed. "That's not exactly what they're interviewing me for." "Still counts," she said. "You never crash into anything." This time he did laugh. It came out of him quick and real, the kind of laugh that surprises you, the kind you didn't know you needed. "Go back to sleep," he said. "It's not even 5, I know." She slid off the chair, padded toward her bedroom. At the doorway, she stopped and looked back at him over her shoulder. "Dad, yeah. Come home with good news." He held her gaze for a moment. "I'll do my best," he said. She disappeared. He heard her settle back into her bed, the soft creak of the mattress, then silence. He turned back to his coffee. 14 days. He drank it standing up. The drive to the distribution center took 22 minutes on a normal morning. Robert left the apartment at 8:15, giving himself 45 minutes of buffer. He wore the blue jacket, a dark navy blazer he'd bought 4 years ago for a friend's wedding, and had kept carefully preserved ever since, because he'd always known he'd need it again someday. He'd polished his shoes. His notes were folded in his breast pocket. He felt for the first time in a long time, like something was about to go right. Traffic on Meridian Avenue was light. He merged onto Route 7, the main corridor that cut through downtown toward the industrial district, where the warehouse sat. The morning was gray, the kind of dense cloud cover that felt like a ceiling pressing down on the city, but the road was clear. He made good time. He was going to be early. He was going to sit in that interview room with 5 minutes to spare, review his notes one last time, and walk in calm. He was going to get this job. He was going to call Chloe from the parking lot afterward and say, "Hey, good news." He had already decided how he would say it. Casual, understated, like he hadn't been holding his breath for 3 weeks. Then everything changed. He heard it before he saw it. A sound like the world being torn in half metal, glass, something heavier, a terrible concussive impact that he felt in his chest before his brain registered what it was. The intersection at Route 7 and Callister was 50 yards ahead. A luxury SUV, black, enormous, the kind of vehicle that costs more than Robert made in 2 years, had T-boned a delivery van at full speed. The SUV had been run into the concrete median and flipped, coming to rest on its passenger side, driver's side facing up. Steam and smoke were already rising from the engine compartment. The delivery van sat crumpled against the traffic light, its driver visible through the window, conscious, moving. Robert pulled over automatically, his body deciding before his mind did. He put the car in park. He got out. There were already 7 or 8 people out of their vehicles. Some were on their phones calling 911, presumably. Others just stood there, watching. The way people sometimes do when the disaster in front of them is too immediate to fully process. When the brain hits a wall and just stops. Nobody was moving toward the SUV. Robert walked toward it. Then he stopped. Because he heard it. A sound coming from inside the overturned vehicle. High-pitched. Small, a child crying. The sound went through him like a current. He didn't think about the interview. He didn't think about the job. He didn't think about the medical bills circled in red on the refrigerator calendar. His daughter's face crossed his mind for exactly 1/2 of 1 second. Then he ran. "Hey!" A man in a construction vest grabbed his arm. "You can't go over there, the engine's smoking. There could be a fuel leak." Robert pulled his arm free without slowing down. "There's a child in that car," he said. He didn't wait for a response. The SUV was on its side. The passenger windows were facing down, crushed against the asphalt. He had to get to the driver's side, which was now the top of the overturned vehicle. He hauled himself up the side of the wreckage, the metal hot under his hands, smoke thickening as he climbed. "Hello," he called. "Can you hear me? Is someone in there? Help me." The voice was tiny, terrified. "I can't get out. Mommy isn't moving." Robert felt his stomach drop. He found the driver's side window, cracked but intact. He could see inside. The driver, a woman in her 40s, was unconscious, suspended by her seatbelt at an angle, her head slumped forward, blood at her temple, but she was breathing. He could see her chest move. And in the back seat, buckled in a car seat that had held, thank God had held, was a little girl, maybe 5 years old. Dark hair, wide, terrified brown eyes, a small gold bracelet on her left wrist. She was looking directly up at him through the cracked window, and when she saw his face, she said, "Are you going to help me?" "Yeah," Robert said. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm going to get you out. Okay? I need you to do something for me. Can you do something for me?" "Okay," she whispered. "I need you to tell me your name." A pause. "Harper." "Harper," he said. "That's a great name. My name is Robert. I'm going to open this window, and I'm going to reach in and unbuckle you, and then I'm going to lift you out. But I need you to be very still for me. Can you be still?" "Is my mommy okay?" Harper asked. He looked at the unconscious woman, back at the little girl. "The people helping her are right behind me," he said. "Right now I need to focus on you. Okay, just you and me. You ready?" She looked at him for a long moment, deciding, the way children decide with everything they have, all at once. "Okay," she said. He pulled off the blazer, the jacket he'd saved for 4 years for a moment exactly like this. The jacket he'd worn to the most important interview of his life, and wrapped it around his fist. 3 strikes. The window spiderwebbed and fell inward in a shower of safety glass. He reached into a burning car for a child who wasn't his. It took 4 minutes. Later, that was the number the paramedics gave him. 4 minutes from the time he climbed up onto that wreckage to the time he handed Harper Ashford to the first responders who had finally arrived. 4 minutes, during which the smoke thickened and the heat from the engine built steadily towards something worse. 4 minutes, during which Harper held his hand and didn't cry again. Not once, because he talked to her the entire time. "You're doing great, Harper. You're being so brave. You know what brave people do? They hold tight. Just hold tight. Tighter than this, you got it. Like this? Exactly like that. You're a professional." He heard her laugh. One small, startled laugh in the middle of all that smoke and heat and fear, like a bird call in a thunderstorm. When the paramedic took her from his arms, Harper turned and looked back at him. "Thank you, Robert," she said. He stood on the side of the road, covered in ash and safety glass, jacket gone, shirt torn at the shoulder, and watched them carry her to the ambulance. He heard sirens everywhere. He saw the paramedics working on the driver of the SUV, the unconscious woman, loading her carefully onto a gurney. He thought, she's going to be okay. Both of them are going to be okay. He looked at his watch. 9:23. He closed his eyes. The interview had started 23 minutes ago. His supervisor, Dolores, called him at noon. He was still in his car, parked at the edge of a Walgreens lot 3 blocks from the accident site. He hadn't moved. He'd been sitting there for 2 hours with the engine off, staring at nothing, feeling the specific, hollow quiet that follows adrenaline when it finally drains away. "Robert." Her voice was careful. Careful in the way people's voices get when they're delivering something bad and they know it. "I heard you were at the accident on Route 7 this morning." "Yeah," he said. "I stopped." A pause. "The panel waited 30 minutes, she said. After that, I couldn't hold them." He said nothing. "I tried, Robert. I really did. But the regional director was there, and there were 3 other candidates, and the policy on rescheduling panels. It's okay," he said. "It's not okay," she said, and he could hear real anger in her voice, not at him. At the situation. At the policy. At the particular cruelty of how the morning had unfolded. "What you did out there. I need to go check on my daughter," he said. "I'll see you tomorrow, Dolores." He hung up. He sat there a while longer. Then he started the car, pointed it toward home, and started calculating. 14 days, $2,400. A new number, zero promotion, no new insurance, no raise. The math had gotten a great deal worse. He didn't tell Chloe. Not about the accident. Not about the interview. Not about the money. He came home, changed his clothes, the shirt went in the trash. The pants were salvageable, and he made her lunch. Grilled cheese. The kind she liked. With the sourdough bread and the extra cheese on the outside that crisped up in the pan. He sat across from her while she ate. She looked at him with those dark, perceptive eyes of hers. "How'd it go?" she asked. He kept his face still. 41 years of practice at carrying things quietly had made him very, very good at this. "Not today," he said. She studied him. "Not today, like it got pushed back," she said carefully. "Or not today, like something happened." He looked at his hands on the table. "Something happened," he said. He didn't elaborate. She didn't push. That was another thing they had built between them. Without ever discussing it, a language of space, of knowing when to ask and when to just be present. She reached across the table and put her small hand over his. She didn't say anything. He looked at her hand on his. He thought, "I will figure this out. I always figure it out." He thought, "What else am I going to do?" He turned his hand over and held hers. "Eat your lunch," he said. "The cheese is getting cold." She pulled her hand back and picked up her sandwich. And Robert Calloway sat across from his daughter and started building a plan he wasn't sure he had the pieces for. While outside the window the city moved on without him, indifferent as ever. And somewhere across town in a hospital room, a little girl with a gold bracelet was telling everyone she met about a man in a blue jacket who had held her hand in the dark and told her she was brave. She didn't know his last name yet, but she was going to remember him for the rest of her life. And so it turned out, was her mother. 3 weeks. That was how long Robert Calloway managed to hold it together before the seams started showing. Not to Chloe. Never to Chloe. To her he was the same man he had always been, steady, quiet, present. He made breakfast every morning. He checked her medication every night. He helped with homework, at the kitchen table under the yellow lamplight, and he laughed at her jokes, and he listened to her talk about school with the kind of focused attention that most people only gave to things that mattered enormously to them. Because she mattered enormously to him. She was the entire architecture of his life. But after she fell asleep, when the apartment went quiet and there was nobody left to perform steadiness for, Robert sat at the kitchen table alone and let himself feel the full weight of where he was. And it was heavy. He had applied to 4 other positions in those 3 weeks. 2 at competing warehouses. 1 called him back, interviewed him, and offered him a rate $2 lower than what he currently made. He declined, politely, and spent the drive home recalculating whether he could have made it work anyway. The math said no. The math always said no lately. The other warehouse sent an automated email that began, "We appreciate your interest," and ended with something about keeping his resume on file, which everyone knew was corporate language for goodbye. The 3rd position was a night shift supervisor role at a food distribution company on the east side of the city. He interviewed well. He knew he interviewed well, because the hiring manager had shaken his hand at the end with both hands, the kind of handshake that means something, and said, "We'll be in touch soon." 3 days of silence followed. Then an email. Someone with more logistics management experience had been selected. The 4th position he didn't even get an interview for. So here he was. Same job, same hourly rate. 14 days had become 11, then 7, then 4, and now the calendar on the refrigerator showed 1 circle in red that was coming at him like a wall. He had no way to stop. Chloe's treatment cost $3,100 out of pocket with his current insurance. He had $1,900 in savings. He was $1,200 short. He spent 2 evenings on the phone with the hospital billing department, a process that required navigating 4 different automated menus before reaching a human being who was kind but limited in what she could offer. There was a payment plan available, she told him. Minimum initial payment of $800. Remainder spread over 6 months. He ran the numbers. 6 months of payments on top of his current expenses meant cutting something else. He looked at the list of his monthly costs with the practiced eye of a man who had already cut everything down to bone. There was nothing left to cut. "Okay," he said into the phone. "I'll figure it out." "I'm sorry we can't do more," the woman said. She sounded like she meant it. "It's not your fault," he said. "Thank you for your help." He hung up and sat very still for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and looked at his delivery app dashboard. He needed 12 more hours of grocery delivery shifts before the end of the week to cover the gap. He checked the available slots. There were 6 hours available Thursday night, 4 on Friday, and a full 8-hour block on Saturday. He booked all of them. He went to bed at 11:30. His alarm was set for 4:47. Dolores stopped him in the hallway at work on a Tuesday morning, 9 days after the accident. She had a look on her face that he recognized, the same expression she wore when she was about to tell him something she'd already argued about on his behalf and lost. "Walk with me," she said. They walked to the loading dock entrance, away from the open floor. Dolores leaned against the wall, crossed her arms, and looked at him directly. "Corporate came back on the panel position," she said. Robert waited. They filled it internally. Someone from the Springfield facility transferred over. "He starts Monday." He nodded once. He had known this was coming. He had known it the moment he'd missed the interview, if he was honest with himself. But knowing a thing was coming and having it actually arrive were different experiences. Robert, Dolores said, "I want you to know I fought for them to give you another shot. I documented your record. I sent them the incident report from Route 7, what you did out there, pulling that kid out, Dolores. They said it was a scheduling matter, and they'd follow proper process next time an equivalent position opened." Her voice carried a controlled fury she was clearly working to contain. "Which could be a year, could be more." He looked at the concrete floor. He thought about the calendar. He thought about Chloe's voice that morning, asking him if he wanted the last of the orange juice. "Okay," he said. "That's all you've got? Okay. What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to be angry," Dolores said. "You saved a child, Robert. You gave up the one chance you had at something better to pull a little girl out of a burning car. And the system just..." She shook her head. "It just rolls right over that. Like it never happened." He looked at her then. And something in his face must have told her everything, because she stopped talking. "I am angry," he said quietly. "I've been angry every morning at 4:47 when that alarm goes off, and I do the math all over again. I've been angry every time I sit across from my daughter and smile and tell her everything is fine when I don't know if everything is fine." He paused. "But being angry doesn't change the numbers," he said. "So I do the math, and I figure out the next step, and I keep moving. That's all I can do." Dolores looked at him for a long moment. "You deserve better than this," she said. "A lot of people deserve better than what they have," he said. "That's not news." He pushed off the wall. "I need to get to the North Dock. My shift started 6 minutes ago." He walked away from her. He did not look back. That Thursday night, he was 3 hours into his grocery delivery shift when his phone buzzed with a notification he didn't recognize. He pulled over in a Kroger parking lot and looked at the screen. It was an email. The sender line read, "Office of Vivian Ashford. Ashford Enterprises." He stared at it. Vivian Ashford. He knew the name the way most people knew it from the business section of the news, from occasional headlines about acquisitions or quarterly earnings, from that particular cultural category of person who was so successful they had become a kind of landmark, something you oriented your sense of the world around without ever expecting to interact with directly. CEO of Ashford Enterprises, one of the largest logistics and infrastructure companies in the country. Forbes list. TED Talk. The kind of person who existed in a different atmosphere entirely. He had no idea what she would want with him. He opened the email. "Mr. Calloway, my name is Diana Reyes. I serve as executive assistant to Vivian Ashford. On the morning of October 14th, you were present at an accident on Route 7 in which you evacuation of a vehicle occupant, a 5-year-old girl named Harper Ashford. Ms. Ashford is Harper's mother. She has been attempting to locate you for the past several days. She would very much like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. This is entirely at your discretion, and there is no obligation of any kind. If you are willing, please respond to this email or call the number below. Thank you for your time, and on behalf of Ms. Ashford and her family, thank you for what you did that morning." Robert read it twice. Then he sat in the Kroger parking lot with his car running and thought about a little girl in a car seat with a gold bracelet on her wrist who had looked up at him through a cracked window and asked, "Are you going to help me?" He thought about her laugh in the smoke. He thought about the way she'd said thank you when the paramedic carried her away. Full name, formal, like a small adult. "Thank you, Robert." He put his phone face down on the passenger seat. He had 6 more deliveries on his route. He picked up the next order and drove. He did not respond to the email that night. He sat on it for 2 days. Not because he was being strategic, not because he was calculating some angle or working out what he wanted from the interaction. Robert Calloway had spent enough of his life around people who calculated their interactions to know that he was not that kind of man, and he had no desire to become one. He sat on it because he was tired, and because the idea of being in any room, virtual or otherwise, with a woman like Vivian Ashford, the boardrooms, the attorneys, the careful language, the specific way powerful people looked at men like him, made something in his chest tighten with an anxiety he hadn't expected. He told himself he didn't need anything from her. He told himself he hadn't saved Harper Ashford for a reward. Both of those things were true. But Chloe's treatment was in 6 days, and he was still $400 short, because Thursday's delivery shift had gotten cut short when a fender bender on the highway backed up traffic for 2 hours and killed half his route window, and Friday's shift had only covered 60% of what he'd projected. Saturday's 8-hour block was his last shot. He was sitting in the break room at the warehouse on Friday afternoon, eating a sandwich he'd packed from home, when his phone buzzed again. Same sender, Diana Reyes, office of Vivian Ashford. "Mr. Calloway, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to follow up on my previous note. Ms. Ashford understands that you may prefer not to make contact, and she would fully respect that decision. She only wanted me to convey, one more time, how deeply grateful she is for what you did for her daughter. Harper is recovering beautifully. She talks about you every day." He read that last line 3 times. "She talks about you every day." He set his sandwich down. He stared at the wall of the break room for a moment. Then he picked up his phone and typed a reply. "Miss Reyes, I'm glad Harper is okay. That's all I needed to know. If Miss Ashford would like to meet, I can make time next week. Regards, Robert Calloway." He hit send before he could overthink it. The response came back in 11 minutes. "Tuesday, 10 a.m., Ashford Enterprises downtown. A car will be sent for you if you'd like. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. This means a great deal." He typed back, "I'll drive myself." He didn't tell Chloe about the meeting. He told himself it was because he didn't want to make it into something it probably wasn't. A courtesy call. A thank you. Nothing more. But the truth was simpler and less comfortable than that. He didn't tell her because hope was a dangerous thing to carry into a situation you couldn't control. He had learned that lesson slowly, over years, through the particular education of raising a sick child on a warehouse salary. The lesson that hope, unchecked, was just disappointment wearing a mask. So he kept it quiet. He did his Saturday delivery shift. He covered the remaining gap with a cash advance from his credit card. Something he hated doing. Something that felt like borrowing against a future he couldn't guarantee. He drove Chloe to her treatment on Sunday morning and sat in the waiting room reading a 3-month-old copy of a magazine he didn't care about, listening to the sounds of the clinic around him. And when the nurse came out and said, "She did great," same as always, he felt the specific, exhausted relief of a man who had just moved a mountain one more time. On Monday night, he pressed his one good shirt. He hung it on the bathroom door. Tuesday morning, he drove himself downtown. He had been to the Ashford Enterprises building once, years ago, to drop off a delivery. He remembered the lobby, all glass and steel, and the particular kind of silence that expensive architecture creates. The kind that makes you feel like you're inside something important. He parked in the public garage across the street because the validated parking required you to check in at the front desk, and he wasn't ready to announce his arrival to anyone who could see him navigating that process. He sat in the car for 4 minutes. He thought about Chloe saying, "You're the best person I know." He thought about Dolores saying, "You deserve better than this." He thought about a little girl in a gold bracelet asking, "Are you going to help me?" He got out of the car. The lobby was exactly as he remembered it. The woman at the front desk was efficient, professional, and looked at him with the calibrated neutrality of someone trained to treat every visitor identically, regardless of what they looked like or what they arrived in. "Robert Calloway," he said. "I have a 10 o'clock with Miss Ashford." A pause, the briefest pause. "Of course, Mr. Calloway. Diana will be right down for you. Would you like to take a seat?" He sat. The lobby had chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He sat in one and held his hands loosely in his lap and watched the people moving through the space, executives in suits, assistants with tablets, a group of men in hard hats who looked as out of place as he did and were clearly less bothered by it. He could feel the building looking at him. He knew that was irrational. Buildings didn't look at people. But class was a particular kind of gravity. You felt its pull even when nobody was saying anything. Even in rooms where everyone was professionally pretending it didn't exist. "Mr. Calloway?" He looked up. A woman in her mid-30s, sharp posture, dark blazer, tablet in hand, was approaching with a direct, warm smile that struck him immediately as genuine. "I'm Diana Reyes. Thank you so much for coming. How was your drive?" "Fine," he said. "Standing, easy parking." She laughed, a real laugh, quick and light. We should tell that to the board members, who can never find the garage entrance. "Can I get you anything? Coffee?" "I'm good," he said. "Thank you." She led him to an elevator. They rode up to the 23rd floor in the kind of comfortable silence that some people were very good at creating. And Diana Reyes, he decided, was one of those people. The elevator opened onto a wide corridor with floor-to-ceiling windows on one side, overlooking the city below. He could see the entire downtown grid from here, the highway, the streets, the intersections. He wondered, distantly, if you could see Route 7 from up here. "She's just finishing a call," Diana said, leading him toward a pair of large doors at the end of the corridor. "She wanted me to tell you that she's been looking forward to this. She doesn't say that about many meetings." "She doesn't have to be nervous," Robert said. "I'm not." Diana glanced at him sideways, and something in her expression shifted, like she was recalibrating. Just slightly. "I'll let her know," she said. She knocked twice, opened the door, and stepped aside for him. He had expected the office to feel like a statement. It didn't. Or rather, it was large, and there were books, real ones, on actual shelves, and a desk that was probably worth more than his car. But it was also lived in. There were coffee cups, a child's drawing on a corkboard near the window, a figure with enormous arms and wild hair, labeled in large, careful letters, "Mommy." A pair of small sneakers tucked under the edge of the desk that hadn't been moved in a hurry. Just left there, the way you leave things when you want them near you. Vivian Ashford was on the phone when he entered, standing at the window with her back to the door, one hand pressed flat to the glass. She was taller than he'd expected. He didn't know why he'd expected anything. She turned when she heard the door, and he saw her face for the first time, not from a photograph, not from a news segment, but fully and in person. And the first thing he noticed was that she looked tired, not the kind of tired that comes from lack of sleep, but the other kind, the kind that accumulates over time from carrying more than any one person was designed to carry. He recognized that tiredness. He saw it in his own mirror every morning. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, and ended the call without ceremony. She set the phone on the desk and walked toward him with her hand extended. "Robert Calloway," she said. "Ms. Ashford," he said, and shook her hand. Her grip was firm and direct. She held it for a beat longer than professional courtesy required, the way you hold someone's hand when you mean it. "Sit, please," she said. "Can Diana get you anything?" "I already offered," Diana said from the doorway. He said no, Robert said. Vivian glanced at Diana with a look he couldn't read, and Diana retreated, pulling the doors closed behind her. The room was quiet. Vivian sat across from him. He noticed that she had chosen the chair across the coffee table, rather than sitting behind her desk. He noticed she'd thought about that, probably. She looked at him for a moment. He got the sense she was a person who looked at people carefully before speaking, which he respected. "I've been trying to find the right way to start this conversation," she said, "since the day I woke up in that hospital room." "How long were you there?" he asked. She blinked, just slightly. He guessed she hadn't expected him to ask that. 4 days, she said. "Concussion, 2 cracked ribs, a hairline fracture in my left wrist." The airbag did most of it. She paused. I don't remember the impact. I remember driving. And then I remember waking up in a room that smelt like antiseptic, and Harper was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my hand and telling me about a man who had talked to her the whole time. Robert said nothing. She said he told her she was brave. Vivian continued. She said he made her laugh. A pause. She said he held her hand and didn't let go until other people came. He looked at his hands. She was scared, he said simply. I didn't want her to be scared alone. Vivian watched him. That's all, she said. That's all, he said. There was a silence between them. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that settles after something true has been said. Diana did research, Vivian said then. After I asked her to find you. It took 3 days because the first responders only had you listed as a bystander who assisted, no full name in the initial report. Someone at the scene had taken a photograph that got posted online, and we tracked it from there. Robert thought about the man in the construction vest who had grabbed his arm. Someone had been taking a photograph at that moment. He hadn't noticed, okay, he said. She found your employment record, Vivian said. She found the promotion interview you missed. She found a pause. She found what you're dealing with your daughter. The air in the room changed. He had not expected this. He did not know why he had not expected it. Of course, she would have researched him. Of course, someone with her resources would know to everything relevant within 72 hours. But knowing it was possible and having it said aloud, in this room by this woman, while he sat in his pressed shirt that he'd worn to the most important interview of his life, and then had not worn again, until today, that was something different. He kept his face still. I'm not here for help, he said. I want you to know that up front. I know, she said. I'm glad Harper is okay. That's genuinely all I needed. I know that too, she said. That's why I wanted to meet you. He looked at her. I've been running this company for 11 years, Vivian said. I've been in boardrooms with some of the smartest, most accomplished people in the country. I've had people do extraordinary things for me and for this company. She paused. And almost all of them wanted something. Not because they were bad people. Because that's how the world works. You give something. You expect something in return. It's rational, it's human. She leaned forward slightly. You ran into a burning car for my daughter, she said. You held her hand for 4 minutes while the engine was getting hot. You lost the only real professional opportunity you'd had in years because you stopped to do that. Her voice was careful, controlled, but underneath it he could hear something that had weight. And the first thing you asked my assistant when she contacted you was how Harper was doing. He said nothing. Not what I could do for you. Not whether I'd heard about what happened to your promotion. Just how is Harper? She's a kid, Robert said. Of course I wanted to know if she was okay, Robert. Her voice was quiet. Most people would have asked anyway, casually, as a lead-in, as a way of establishing that they deserved something. She shook her head slowly. You asked because it was the only thing you actually wanted to know. He thought about arguing with that. He decided not to. I've been trying to understand people like you my whole adult life, Vivian said then. And her voice changed, became less measured, more raw, like she was saying something she'd been holding on to. My father used to tell me that genuinely good people existed. I always thought he was sentimental. I thought the world had shown me enough to know that everyone had an angle. She stopped. Something crossed her face. A fracture in the composure, just for a second. Then my daughter came home from the hospital, talking about a man in a blue jacket, she said. And I started looking for him, and when I found out what it had cost him to stop. She stopped again. Robert watched her pull herself back together. She was, he realized, very practiced at that. The pulling back together, the composure reasserting itself. He recognized the mechanics of it from the inside. I'm not here to offer you charity, she said finally. Her voice level again. I want you to understand that. All right, he said. I want to offer you a conversation, she said. About what you're actually capable of. What you've actually spent 5 years building at that warehouse, without anyone giving it the right name. She paused. Diana pulled your work history, the efficiency systems you redesigned, the reorganization of the loading dock, the incident management protocols you developed after the belt breakdown in March of last year. A pause. None of that is in your job title. No, he said. It's not. Why not? "'Cause my job title is forklift operator," he said. "Nobody asked me to redesign anything. I just saw what wasn't working and fixed it." Vivian looked at him for a long, quiet moment. "That," she said, "is the single most important sentence anyone has said to me in this office in 6 months." He didn't know what to do with that. He said nothing. "I'm not offering you charity," she said again. And this time, the repetition felt like something she needed him to hear clearly. "I'm asking for your time. I want to understand what you actually know, what you've actually built, and what you might be capable of in an environment that sees it." She folded her hands in her lap. "If nothing comes of the conversation, you've lost an hour and a tank of gas. If something does," she let that sentence sit unfinished. Robert looked at her. He thought about the calendar on the refrigerator. He thought about the payment plan and the credit card advance and the 8-hour delivery shifts at midnight. He thought about Chloe's hand over his on the kitchen table. The hand that hadn't said anything because it didn't need to. He thought about a little girl in a gold bracelet who laughed in the middle of all that smoke. "All right," he said. "Let's have that conversation." Vivian Ashford exhaled just barely, just enough that he caught it, and for the first time since he'd walked into that room, the tiredness in her face shifted into something else. Not relief exactly. Something deeper than relief. Like a person who has been standing alone at the edge of something for a very long time, and has finally, unexpectedly, found someone standing beside them. She reached over to the table and picked up a folder. "Tell me," she said, "about the loading dock." He talked for 40 minutes. That was the part that surprised him later, when he replayed it, not the conversation itself, not Vivian's questions or her reactions, but the simple fact that he had talked for 40 minutes straight and never once felt like he was performing. He was just explaining. The way he explained things to Chloe when she asked how something worked. Direct. Unadorned. "Here is the problem. Here is what I saw. Here is what I did about it." He told her about the loading dock reorganization first, because that was where she had started. He explained that when he had arrived at the warehouse 5 years ago, the North Dock was processing outbound freight in a sequence that made logical sense on paper, but created a physical bottleneck every time 2 forklifts needed to access the staging area simultaneously. Nobody had designed it badly on purpose. They had just never had someone stand in the middle of it for a full shift and watch where the time actually went. So he had watched. For 3 days on his own time. Between loads, he had tracked the movement patterns and identified 4 specific points where the sequence compounded delays. Then he had drawn a revised flow on the back of a shipping manifest and given it to Dolores. She had looked at it for about 90 seconds, taken it upstairs, and 2 weeks later, the dock had been reconfigured. He had never been credited for it officially. He had not asked to be. "Why not?" Vivian asked. "Because the dock ran better," he said. That was the point. She wrote something down. He told her about the incident management protocols next. The belt breakdown in March of the previous year had shut down the main conveyor for a cascade failure that had started with a single faulty tension roller and ended with a 6-figure loss in delayed shipments. Robert had not been on shift when it happened, but the next morning he had gone in early, before his shift started, and had spent 2 hours with the maintenance team walking through the sequence of decisions that had allowed a small mechanical issue to become a catastrophic one. What he found was not negligence. It was something more mundane and more dangerous, the absence of a shared vocabulary. The maintenance team and the floor supervisors had been operating on different assumptions about what constituted an alert-level situation versus a watch-level situation. And because there was no protocol that defined those terms in writing, a situation that should have triggered an immediate shutdown had instead triggered a series of escalating conversations while the failure worsened. He wrote a 1-page protocol. Clear language. 3 categories. Specific trigger conditions for each. He gave it to Dolores. She had passed it up the chain. It was now the standard procedure at 3 facilities in the region. His name was not on the document. Vivian looked up from her notepad. "You wrote the protocol that is currently in use at 3 regional facilities," she said, "and your name isn't on it." "I work in shipping and receiving," Robert said. "My name didn't need to be on it." She put her pen down. "Robert," she said slowly, "do you understand what I'm looking at right now?" He waited. I'm looking at a man who has been doing senior-level operational work for 5 years at a junior-level hourly rate, she said, with zero institutional recognition. And you keep describing it like it was just obvious, like anyone would have done it. Anyone who was paying attention would have, he said. No, she said. They wouldn't. I have people on this floor who are paid 4 times what you make, who would not have done what you described. Not because they're not intelligent. Because they're not paying attention the way you're paying attention. She leaned forward. You're not watching the system to optimize your position in it. You're watching it to make it work better. That is an entirely different thing. And it is extraordinarily rare. He looked at her. He didn't know what to say to that. I'm not flattering you, she said, reading his expression. I'm telling you what I see. You can decide what to do with it. He nodded once. She picked up her pen again. Tell me about the incident in November. The worker injury claim. He paused. He had not expected her to know about that one. Diana did thorough research, Vivian said, not quite smiling. He told her about November. A new hire, 23 years old, first month on the floor, had been operating a hand truck in the south aisle when a poorly secured pallet shifted. The stack had come down partly on him, injuring his shoulder. Not severely, but enough to require a hospital visit. The company's initial incident report, filed by the shift supervisor on duty, had listed the cause as operator error. Robert had read the report on the break room bulletin board and known immediately that it was wrong. He had gone back to the south aisle that evening, on his own time, and walked the sequence. The pallet had been secured according to the standard procedure. But the standard procedure, as written, was insufficient for the specific rack configuration in the south aisle, where the overhead clearance was lower than the rest of the facility, and created a vibration pocket when the loading doors were open simultaneously. Anyone following the procedure, exactly as written, was statistically likely to experience a shift in that specific location under those specific conditions. The issue was not the operator. The issue was the procedure. He had written a 2-page report and given it to Delors with a request that it be forwarded to the safety officer. It had been. The procedure had been corrected. The worker's injury claim had been reclassified. The kid had come back to work 6 weeks later. He had never told anyone he'd written the report. Why not? Vivian asked. Because it wasn't about me, Robert said. It was about making sure a 23-year-old kid didn't lose his job over something that wasn't his fault. The office was very quiet. Vivian Ashford set down her pen again. She looked at him for a long moment, and this time the look was different from the careful, analytical attention of the previous 40 minutes. This was something else. Something more personal. I need to ask you something, she said. Okay, he said. She took a breath. Why did you save me? He stopped. I'm sorry? On Route 7, she said. Why did you save me? He looked at her. I didn't save you, he said. She blinked. I saved your daughter, he said. The words landed in the room and sat there. Vivian's composure held for exactly 2 seconds. He could see her holding it, the way he had seen her hold herself together earlier. The practiced, internal bracing that people learn when they have spent years not having the option of falling apart. He recognized the effort of it because it was the same effort he made every morning at 4:47. But something had shifted this time. Her eyes were bright. Not from tears, not quite yet, but from the specific pressure that comes before them. When something true hits the place in you that is not defended. You didn't see a CEO's daughter, she said. No, he said. I saw a scared kid who needed someone. Most people would have waited, she said. Most people were waiting. I know, he said. I saw them. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment. My daughter has been scared, he said. More times than she should have been. Hospital, scared. The kind of scared where you don't understand what's happening to your body, but you understand that the adults around you are worried. And that's the most frightening part. He paused. I have held her hand through things that I could not fix. Things where all I could do was stay. He looked down briefly, then back up. I promised myself a long time ago that if I ever saw a child in that kind of fear, and I could do something about it, I would do something about it. That's all. There was no calculation. It was just she was there, and she needed someone, and I was there. Vivian pressed her lips together. She was fighting it now. He could see her fighting it. Harper told me, Vivian said, and her voice was lower now, quieter, like she was conserving something. That you made her laugh. I asked her her name, he said. She told me. I said it was a great name. She laughed a little. You made my 5-year-old daughter laugh while she was trapped in a burning car, Vivian said. I needed her to stay calm, he said. Laughing helps. How do you know that? He looked at her. Chloe has been through 8 procedures in the last 3 years, he said quietly. I know how to make a scared kid laugh. That was the moment. Later, he would think about it, the exact moment, that something changed in the room. Not dramatically. Not the way things changed in movies. With swelling music. And a visual shift. It was quiet. It was just the moment when Vivian Ashford, who had spent 11 years building walls of competence and control, and professional composure around herself, stopped holding one of them up. One tear, just one. She pressed 2 fingers to the corner of her eye, immediately. Like an automatic response. Like she had trained herself to contain it before it could become anything. He pretended not to see it. She probably knew he saw it. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, he said. She pulled herself back together in about 4 seconds flat. He counted, because he admired the efficiency of it. I have a proposal, she said, and her voice was professional again. Level and clear. I'd like you to hear it completely before you respond. All right, he said. She reached back to her desk and picked up a second folder, thicker than the first, and set it on the coffee table between them. Ashford Enterprises runs community operations across 14 regional sites, she said. We have programs in workforce development, supply chain training, and facility management partnerships with municipalities. For 2 years, I have been trying to build a director of community operations role that actually functions, someone who understands both the operational side and the human side. Someone who can walk into a facility that isn't working and identify what's actually broken, not what the report says is broken. She paused. I've hired twice for this role in the past 2 years. Both times I hired the person who looked best on paper. Both times it didn't work. He looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. Because looking good on paper and seeing what's actually in front of you are 2 different things, he said. Yes, she said. He thought about that for a moment. What does the role pay, he asked. She told him. He kept his face completely still. He was very good at this. The number, she said, was more than double his current annual income. More than his 2 jobs combined. More than he had ever made in a single year in his life. Benefits package, he asked. Full medical, dental, vision, she said. For you and your dependents. He heard the words "for you and your dependents" and felt something move in his chest that he refused to let reach his face. I need you to understand something, he said. Go ahead, she said. I'm not interested in a position that exists because of what happened on Route 7, he said. I'm not interested in a courtesy title or a charitable appointment. If I take a job, I take it because I can do the work and the work matters. Not because you feel like you owe me something. I know, she said. I don't think you owe me anything, he said. I know that too, she said. That's the only reason I'm offering. He looked at her. You said you've hired twice for this role, he said. What specifically didn't work? She picked up her pen again. Tell me what you think the job actually requires, she said, and I'll tell you how close you are. He looked at the folder on the table. He looked at Vivian Ashford. Then he leaned forward and started talking. He told her that a role like the one she was describing failed when it was built around expertise instead of perception. You could hire someone with a PhD in supply chain logistics and a decade of facility management experience and still have them walk into a broken system and not see it, because they were looking for what they had been trained to look for, and the thing that was actually wrong had never been in a textbook. He told her that the human side and the operational side were not 2 different things that needed to be balanced. They were the same thing. A system failed because people failed, and people failed because they were not seen. If you saw the people, you saw the system. Vivian Ashford had stopped writing. She was just watching him. He didn't notice. He was still talking. He told her that in his experience, 14 years of warehouse and logistics work, most of it in facilities where management and floor workers existed in a state of structured mutual ignorance, the most expensive operational problems were never equipment problems or procedure problems. They were communication problems. Specifically, They were the problems created by the gap between what the person at the top believed was happening and what the person on the floor knew was happening and had stopped trying to report because reporting it had never produced any result. He paused. "How do you close that gap?" Vivian asked. "You go stand in it," he said. "You stop managing from the report and start working from the floor. You talk to the person who operates the equipment, not the person who supervises the person who operates it. And then you make sure that when they tell you something is wrong, something actually changes." He paused again, not because it makes them feel good, because it's the only way to find out what's actually true. A silence. "That's what you did with the loading dock," she said. "That's what I do with everything," he said. Vivian set her pen down for the third time. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has been searching for a specific thing for a long time and has just found it in the last place they expected. "Robert," she said, "I have a board meeting in 40 minutes. I need to end this conversation. But I need to tell you something before I do." He waited. "I'm not offering you this position because you pulled my daughter out of that car," she said. "I mean that precisely. I want to be completely clear with you. Because I think you're the kind of man who will walk out of this building convinced this is charity, and I cannot let you do that." He said nothing. "Everything you just said to me," she said, "in the last 10 minutes about operational systems and communication gaps and standing in the problem, that is, the framework I have been trying to articulate to my leadership team for 2 years. I have paid consultants $60,000 to develop that framework in language that my board would accept." She paused. "You just said it better. In 10 minutes. Unprompted." "I'm just describing what I've seen," he said. "I know," she said. "That's the point." He looked at the folder on the table. He thought about the calendar on the refrigerator. He thought about Chloe's treatment, the payment plan, the credit card advance that was going to take him 4 months to pay off. He thought about Dolores saying, "You deserve better than this," and himself saying, "A lot of people deserve better than what they have." He thought about what it would mean to take a job that paid enough that he could stop counting the days. He thought about what it would mean to take a job he didn't earn. "I need to think," he said. "Of course," she said. "Take whatever time you need." He picked up the folder from the table. He stood. She stood. They looked at each other across the coffee table. Two people who had come into this meeting as something close to strangers and were leaving it as something harder to name. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Harper," he said. "How is she?" "Really?" "Not the press release version." Vivian's expression shifted completely. In the space of 1 second, she went from CEO to mother. The transformation, absolute and immediate, and what he saw on her face when she talked about her daughter was something he recognized with his whole body. "She's wonderful," Vivian said softly. "She's been drawing pictures of a man in a blue jacket and showing them to everyone. She made one for her teacher. She made one for the building maintenance guy. A breath. She sleeps fine. She's not afraid of cars. She asks me sometimes if she'll see you again." Vivian paused. "I didn't know what to tell her." Robert nodded slowly. "She can know that I asked about her," he said. "If that helps." Vivian looked at him. Something in her face was very quiet. "It will help a great deal," she said. He moved toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. "The loading dock thing," he said without turning around. "Yes," she said. "The 11 minutes I cut off the fulfillment cycle," he said. "I always thought it was closer to 13. But Dolores said 11 in her report. So I've been saying 11. He heard something from behind him that might have been a laugh. Quiet. Surprised. "It was 14, Vivian said. "Diana found the original throughput data." He turned and looked at her. "Figures," he said. He walked out. Diana was waiting in the corridor. She walked him to the elevator without being asked, the way she probably did everything efficiently, warmly before the need was stated. "How'd it go?" she asked. And he got the sense she was not entirely asking professionally. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. The elevator arrived. He stepped in. "Mr. Calloway," Diana said. He looked up. "For what it's worth, she canceled 2 calls to clear that hour for you. She hasn't canceled calls for anyone in about 4 months." A pause. "Just so you know." The doors closed. He rode down 23 floors alone with the folder in his hands and the sound of the city rising up through the glass below. He thought about Harper, drawing pictures of a man in a blue jacket. He thought about Chloe's hand over his on the kitchen table. He thought about Vivian's face when she became a mother for 1 second instead of a CEO. He thought about what it meant to be seen. Not the performance of being seen. Not the credential of it. Not the title or the salary or the official record, but the actual experience of having someone look at you and understand, without explanation, what you were actually doing and why. He thought about how long it had been since anyone had done that for him. He walked through the lobby and out into the morning air and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. "How'd it go? Did you get a job? I've been dying over here. Don't leave me in suspense, Dad, come on." He looked at the text for a long time. He started typing. Still figuring it out, he hit send. 3 seconds. Still figuring it out. What does that mean? Is that good still figuring it out or bad still figuring it out? He almost smiled. "Good," he typed. "I think." He put his phone in his pocket and walked to the parking garage across the street. He sat in his car for a while before he started it. He opened the folder on his lap. Inside was a full position description, an organizational chart, a summary of the Community Operations Division's current programs, and a handwritten note on Ashford Enterprises' letterhead. The handwriting was deliberate and clear. Route 7 did not create your value. It revealed it. Whatever you decide, thank you. For Harper. For all of it, VA. He read it twice. He folded it carefully and placed it back in the folder. He started the car. He had not decided anything yet. But driving home, something had changed in the quality of the weight he was carrying, not lighter. Exactly, but different. The way weight feels different when you are no longer carrying it completely alone. He drove through the intersection at Route 7 and Callister on his way home. He didn't plan to. It was not the most direct route. But he found himself there anyway, at the intersection where everything had changed. And he sat at the red light and looked at the median barrier, and the asphalt, and the ordinary afternoon traffic moving through a place that had, 4 weeks ago, been the site of the most consequential 4 minutes of his life. There was nothing to see. The city had moved on. The city always moved on. But he sat there until the light turned green. Then he drove home to his daughter. She met him at the door before he had his key out, which meant she had been watching the window, which she would categorically deny if he mentioned it. "Well," she said. He looked at her face. 11 years old, dark eyes, hair that went in 3 directions, wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon on it that he couldn't identify. His daughter, the entire architecture of his life. "Someone offered me a job today," he said. Her eyes went wide. "A real job?" "A very real job," he said. "Doing what?" "Something I'm apparently already doing," he said. "Just with a title this time." She grabbed his arm. "Dad, are you going to take it?" He looked at her. He thought about a woman in a 23rd floor office who had asked him why he saved her daughter, and he thought about what he had said, and he thought about the look on her face when he had said it. He thought about what it meant to do the right thing when nobody was watching. He thought about what it meant when someone, finally, was. "I'm thinking about it," he said, "Dad." She looked up at him with those dark, impossibly perceptive eyes. "What's there to think about?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he put his arm around her shoulder and walked them both through the door. "Come help me make dinner," he said. "I'll explain everything." She made a noise of extreme frustration that he secretly loved. "You always do this," she said. "You always make me wait until dinner. Why can't you just tell me now?" "Because," he said, "good news tastes better with food." She groaned theatrically. He laughed. It came out of him easy and real, the same way it had in the kitchen 3 weeks ago when she'd told him he never crashed into anything. And it surprised him the way real laughter always did, arriving without warning from somewhere deeper than thought. The apartment door closed behind them. Outside, the city went on doing what cities did, indifferent and enormous, and full of people carrying things nobody else could see. But in that kitchen, under the yellow lamplight, a man who had spent 41 years learning how to hold everything together, alone, started telling his daughter about the day. Someone finally looked at him and saw what he was actually worth. And somewhere on the 23rd floor of a glass tower downtown, Vivian Ashford stood at the window of her office and looked out at the city below. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not feel like she was looking at it alone. She picked up her phone. She called Diana. "Clear my afternoon," she said. "All of it," Diana said. "All of it," Vivian said. A pause. "He's going to take it," Diana said. It was not quite a question. Vivian looked at the city. "Yes," she said, "he is." She hung up. She looked at the drawing on the corkboard near the window. The figure with the enormous arms and wild hair, labeled in careful letters. Mommy. Beside it, Harper had taped a second drawing sometime in the past week. Vivian had seen it go up and had not asked about it. She looked at it now. A figure in a blue jacket. Enormous arms extended outward. Labeled in the same careful large letters. The man who stayed. Vivian looked at that drawing for a long time. Then she sat back down at her desk and got back to work. He called Diana Reyes on a Wednesday morning. Not Tuesday, which was the day after he had driven home with the folder and told Chloe everything over grilled chicken and rice. Not Monday of the following week, which was when Chloe had started leaving printed articles about Ashford Enterprises on the kitchen counter in increasingly obvious locations, as though she were leaving breadcrumbs for a man who was already standing at the door. He called on Wednesday because he had spent 6 days doing the one thing he always did before making any decision that mattered. He worked the problem completely alone until he was certain the answer he arrived at was his own and nobody else's. He had read the folder 3 times. He had researched Ashford Enterprises independently, not the version in the folder, which was curated and presented with intention, but the actual operational record. The workforce development programs Vivian had mentioned were real. 2 of them had won regional citations for impact. One had been shut down 2 years ago, after a leadership failure that had made the local business section briefly, and Robert had found the archived article and read it carefully, because the failure of a program told you more about an organization than its successes did. What he found in that article was not misconduct or indifference. What he found was the same problem he had described to Vivian in her office, a gap between what leadership believed was happening and what was actually happening on the ground. The program director had been talented and credentialed and had never once visited the communities the program was supposed to serve. By the time anyone realized the disconnect, the program had been running for 18 months on metrics that measured activity instead of impact. He had read that article and felt something he hadn't expected. Recognition, not vindication, not anger on behalf of the people the program had failed. Just the quiet, specific recognition of a man who had spent 5 years watching that exact dynamic play out in smaller ways on a warehouse floor, and who had developed, over those 5 years, a very clear understanding of how to stop it. He knew what the job required. He knew because he had been doing a version of it for free, without a title, without recognition, for longer than most people held titles at all. So on Wednesday morning, at 8:14, before his shift started, he sat in his car in the warehouse parking lot and called Diana. "Mr. Calloway," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice before she said another word. "Good morning." "Good morning," he said. "I'd like to accept the position, if it's still available." A pause that lasted exactly long enough for Diana to compose herself. "It is very much still available," she said. "Can I tell Miss Ashford?" "That's why I'm calling," he said. "She's going to be glad to hear this," Diana said. "Diana," he said. "Yes? I need something before I sign anything, of course." "What do you need?" "I need to understand the Eastfield program," he said. "The one that was shut down 2 years ago. I need to understand what actually happened, not the official version, before I accept formally. I need to know that there's room in this organization to do the job the way it actually needs to be done, not the way it looks good to do it." A longer pause. "Hold on," Diana said. He heard the sound of her moving, a door closing, and then her voice came back quieter and more direct. "She's going to want to hear you say that herself," Diana said. "Can you come in Thursday?" "I can come in Thursday," he said. 8:30, Diana said. "And Mr. Calloway, she's not going to give you the official version," he believed her. "I'll be there at 8:15, he said. He hung up. He sat in the parking lot for another 2 minutes. Then he got out of his car, walked into the warehouse, and ran his shift with the same focused attention he brought to everything. Because, whatever else was changing, this was still his job until it wasn't. And he did not do anything halfway. Dolores caught him on the North Dock at noon. She looked at him with the particular expression of a woman who had known him for 5 years and could read the specific quality of his stillness, like a weather instrument. "Something's different," she said. "Good different or bad different?" he said, without looking up from the manifest he was reviewing. "Different different," she said, which with you could mean anything. He set the manifest down. He looked at her. "I have a meeting Thursday morning," he said. "I may need to come in late." Dolores studied him. "Robert, what kind of meeting?" He held her gaze. "The kind that might change things," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is this about Ashford Enterprises?" He didn't answer, which was its own answer. Dolores pressed her lips together. Her eyes went bright for a second, in a way that she would have been mortified to acknowledge. "Good," she said. Her voice was rough. "Good. I haven't signed anything," he said. "But you're going to." He picked up his manifest. "Come in late Thursday," she said, already walking away. "I'll cover your morning." He didn't say thank you. With Dolores, you didn't have to. Thursday arrived. He was in Vivian's office at 8:18, 2 minutes early, even by his revised timeline, because he was constitutionally incapable of being late to something that mattered. Vivian was already there. No phone call this time. She was at the coffee table when he walked in, 2 cups already poured. The folder from the previous week open in front of her, alongside a second, thinner file that he didn't recognize. "Sit," she said. "The coffee's real. Diana finally convinced me to replace the machine." He sat. He picked up the coffee. It was, in fact, significantly better than anything he'd had in the past week. "You want to talk about Eastfield," she said, before he could speak. "Yes," he said. She nodded once. She pulled the thinner folder to the front and slid it across the table to him. "That's the internal review," she said. "Not the external summary. The actual review, including the things that didn't make it into the board presentation." He looked at the folder. He looked at her. "Most people who read that," she said, "will see a program director who failed to execute. They'll see a management oversight gap." She paused. "What do you see?" He opened the folder and read. He was a fast reader. He had learned to be. The way you learned most survival skills, not through formal training but through necessity, through years of needing to understand things quickly so he could respond to them. He read for 6 minutes. Vivian poured a second cup of coffee for herself and waited. He respected that she didn't fill the silence with anything. He closed the folder. "I see an organization that was measuring the wrong things," he said, "and a director who was incentivized to keep measuring the wrong things because the right things were harder to quantify." Vivian looked at him. "The program was showing participation numbers," he said. "Attendance at training sessions. Number of individuals served. Hours delivered. All of those numbers were real, and they were all going up." He tapped the folder. "But participation isn't employment. Hours in a classroom isn't job placement. And nobody in the reporting chain was asking the question that actually mattered, which was, are the people going through this program ending up better off? Why weren't they asking?" Vivian said. It was not a rhetorical question. "Because the person running the program was reporting to a VP of Community Affairs, who was reporting to you," Robert said. "And somewhere in that chain, the question changed from 'is this working' to 'does this look like it's working?' And once that happens, the data follows the appearance instead of the reality." The room was very quiet. "What would you have done differently?" she said. "I would have gone to Eastfield," he said. "In the first month, before any program design was finalized. I would have sat in the actual community and talked to the actual people the program was supposed to serve, and I would have asked them what they needed, not what we had decided they needed." He paused. "Then I would have built the program around what they said. Then I would have gone back every quarter and asked if it was still true." Vivian looked at him for a long moment. "That's not how community programs are typically designed in organizations this size," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why they typically don't work." She picked up her coffee. "The board is going to push back on some of what you're describing," she said. "Not because they don't want the programs to work, because what you're describing takes longer and is harder to put in a quarterly report." "I know," he said. "And you're comfortable with that?" "I'm not comfortable with it," he said. "I'm capable of it. Those are different things." She looked at him with something that was not quite a smile and not quite admiration, but lived somewhere in the territory between. Sign the offer letter, she said. I'll need 2 weeks, he said, to finish out at the warehouse properly. I don't leave jobs in the middle. Of course, she said. And one other thing, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Chloe's next treatment is in 3 weeks, he said. I need to know the benefits are active before then. No hesitation. Diana will process the enrollment today, she said. By Monday morning, she'll be covered. He heard those words, by Monday morning. She'll be covered, and something happened in his chest that he could not have described and refused to show. He nodded once. He kept his hands still in his lap, and his face even. Thank you, he said. Thank you, she said, for coming back. He signed the offer letter. He drove to the warehouse and finished his shift. That night, he told Chloe at dinner. He was halfway through explaining the role when she stood up from her chair, walked around the table, and hugged him so hard that he had to put both hands on the table to keep his balance. She was small, but she had his grip. I knew it, she said into his shoulder. You didn't know anything, he said. I knew everything, she said. I've known for 2 weeks. You couldn't have known for 2 weeks. This just happened. Dad. She pulled back and looked at him with enormous, exasperated certainty. You've been walking different since you came home from that first meeting. You walk like this when you've decided something. She demonstrated, straightening her spine, lifting her chin slightly. It was, he realized with a jolt, an uncanny imitation of himself. Like you've already made up your mind, and you're just waiting for everyone else to catch up. He stared at her. You're 11, he said. Almost 12, she said, and went back to her seat and picked up her fork, like she hadn't just precisely diagnosed something about him that he had never articulated to himself. He sat there looking at his plate and feeling, in the way you sometimes felt things that were too large to hold all at once, that every hard year had been building toward this particular Tuesday evening. This dinner table, this child, looking at him like he was exactly who she had always known he was. He did not say any of that out loud. Eat your dinner, he said. She grinned. 2 weeks later, on a Friday, he cleared out his locker at the warehouse. He had worked there 5 years and 3 months. He knew every system in the building, every personality on the floor, every particular creak and tendency of the machinery. He knew which conveyor ran hot in summer, which dock doors stuck in humidity, which supervisor needed to hear something twice before it registered, and which one needed to see it written down. He left notes, actual written notes, organized by system and department, that he gave to Dolores in a folder on his last day. He had spent 4 evenings writing them, because the institutional knowledge in his head was valuable, and he was not going to take it with him and leave the people he had worked alongside for 5 years to rediscover what he already knew. Dolores looked at the folder. She looked at him. Robert, she said. They're organized by section, he said. The loading dock sequence is in the front. The South Aisle procedure is in there too, the revised version with the updated rack clearance specs. She opened it. She looked at the first page. She closed it. She pressed the folder against her chest, like it was something valuable, which, in the specific currency of a warehouse floor, it was. Who writes notes like this when they leave a job, she said. Someone who might have to consult them someday, he said. Call me if anything breaks down. She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind she usually kept under strict professional control. She hugged him. Dolores, who he had never seen hug anyone in 5 years, hugged him. He hugged her back. Go do something worth doing, she said into his shoulder, and her voice was not entirely steady. That's the plan, he said. He walked out of the warehouse into the morning air and did not look back, because looking back was not something Robert Calloway had ever had the luxury of doing, and he was not about to start now. His first day at Ashford Enterprises was a Monday. He arrived at 7:45, which was 45 minutes before anyone expected him, because he needed to walk the floor before he walked into any meeting. This was the way he had always approached a new environment, not from the top down, where the official version lived, but from the ground up, where the true version was. Diana met him at the elevator with coffee and a visitor badge that had already been upgraded to a full access credential, which told him that Vivian had thought about his arrival before he had. She's in Chicago until Wednesday, Diana said. She wanted me to tell you that she left instructions for you to have full access to everything. The community ops team knows you're starting. Some of them are nervous. Why nervous? He said. Because the last two people in your role made a lot of changes very quickly, Diana said. And most of the changes didn't last. He nodded slowly. Good to know. She also wanted me to tell you, Diana said. And she lowered her voice slightly. Not from secrecy, but from the particular register people used when delivering something personal. That Harper has been asking every morning if today is the day you come to work with Mommy. He stopped walking. She's been asking that every day? He said. Since the day you signed the offer letter, Diana said. We may have mentioned your start date within earshot of her. A small, unapologetic smile. Vivian's working from Chicago on a deal that's been 6 months in development. She couldn't move it, but she feels terrible about not being here today. Tell her not to, he said. I don't need a welcome committee. I know, Diana said. She knows that too, which is exactly why she feels terrible. He looked at her. You've worked for her a long time, he said. 7 years, Diana said. What's she actually like, he said. Not as a test. He was genuinely asking, the way he asked about every system he was about to work within. Diana considered this seriously, which he appreciated. She's the most disciplined person I've ever met, Diana said. And the loneliest. Not because she doesn't have people around her. Because most of the people around her are there for what she represents, not who she is. A pause. She's been different since the accident. Since you. She glanced at him, not fragile. The opposite. Like something she'd been bracing against for years just. Stopped. He didn't respond to that. He wasn't sure how to. The community ops team is in conference room B, Diana said, returning smoothly to professional territory. I'd suggest giving them about an hour before you go in. Let them have their morning the way they have it. I'm going to the Eastfield site first, he said. Diana stopped. She said, today, he said. Before any meetings. Before introductions. I want to see the site before I see any more documents about it. A pause. I can call ahead. Don't, he said. I'd rather they not know I'm coming. Diana looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something he had not expected. She smiled. Not the professional, calibrated smile he had seen in the lobby the first day. A different one. The smile who was swang, something they had hoped for, actually happening. The address is in the folder Diana gave you, she said. Which you already read. I read it Sunday, he said. Of course you did, she said. He went to Eastfield. It was a 40-minute drive from the corporate tower to the community center that served as the operational hub for the workforce development program. He drove himself. He parked on the street. He walked in wearing the same clothes he would have worn to the warehouse, not a suit, not a blazer, just clean, quiet, unremarkable. The woman at the front desk looked up. Can I help you? I'm Robert Calloway, he said. I just started with Ashford Enterprises. I'm going to be running the Community Operations Division. I wanted to come see what you do here before I started making any decisions about it. A pause. You want a tour? She said. I want to watch, he said. If that's okay. Just for a few hours. Pretend I'm not here, she studied him. She was maybe 50, with a no-nonsense directness in her face that reminded him of Dolores. Nobody from corporate has ever come here unannounced, she said. I know, he said. That's part of why I'm here. She studied him for another second. Then she stood up. I'm Renata, she said. I've been running this front desk for 3 years. You want to know what's actually happening here. You talk to me. Not the program director. Renata, he said. You just became the most important person I've spoken to this week. She looked at him sharply, as if checking for condescension. Finding none, she relaxed slightly. The morning job readiness session starts in 20 minutes, she said. Coffee's in the back. It's bad. I've had worse, he said. He spent 4 hours at Eastfield. He did not hold a single formal meeting. He did not introduce himself as anyone's director. He sat in the back of the job readiness session and watched, and he talked to the participants during the break, not about the program, just about them, where they were coming from, what they were trying to get to, what the program had given them, and what it hadn't. He helped a man named Gerald practice his handshake for an interview he had that afternoon. He listened to a woman named Murphy describe the 3-bus commute she made every morning to get to the session on time, and he noted, quietly, that the training schedule had been designed around corporate office hours rather than public transit schedules. He found 6 things that weren't working within the first 2 hours. Not dramatically broken, not catastrophically wrong. Just misaligned thought program, designed around what made sense from a conference room and implemented it in a reality where people took 3 buses and had children in school and couldn't always make it to a 9 o'clock session. He wrote everything down in his notebook, longhand, the way he always did when he was learning a system. Not conclusions, observations. He had learned a long time ago that the gap between observing and concluding was where most mistakes lived. At 12:30 he found Renata. "Thank you," he said. "Did you find what you came for?" She said. "I found what I needed to start," he said. "That's different." She nodded slowly. "Are you going to change everything?" "No," he said. "I'm going to change the things that are actually wrong and leave the things that are actually working exactly where they are." She looked at him. "The last guy changed everything," she said. "On his 3rd day. Half of it he changed back 6 months later." "I know," Robert said. "I read the review." "The external review," she said, with a slight edge. "The internal one." A pause. "Ms. Ashford gave you the internal review?" Renata said. "On the day I agreed to take the job," he said. Renata studied him for a long moment. Something in her face shifted, the specific recalibration of a person who has been disappointed enough times to be careful with expectation, and who is now quietly considering the possibility that this time might be different. "The transit schedule," she said. "First thing I'm fixing," he said. She nodded once. Crisp, final good. He drove back to the corporate building. He spent the afternoon with the community ops team, not leading a meeting, just sitting in on theirs, listening to how they talked about the programs, what language they used, where the energy was, and where it went flat. He asked 2 questions the entire afternoon. Specific questions, aimed at specific gaps he had already identified. Both times, the person who answered looked slightly startled, then thoughtful. Then he could see it happening, engaged in a way they hadn't been before. At 4:50, he was in the elevator when his phone rang. "Unknown number." "Chicago area code," he answered. "You went to Eastfield," Vivian's voice. "Not a question." "First thing this morning," he said. "Diana told me, I figured." A pause. "What did you find?" 6 immediate adjustments. 3 medium-term structural changes. 1 larger question about program philosophy that I want to sit with before I bring it to you." He paused. "Renata is the most important person on that site, and she's been treated like furniture." A longer pause. "I know," Vivian said, and something in her voice was tight. "I should have caught that. You were running 14 sites from a 23rd floor office," he said. "Renata should have been in your chair telling you what was wrong. That's a system problem, not a judgment problem." Silence on the line. "Robert," she said. "Yeah. How was your first day?" He considered this. "Good," he said. "That's it? Just good?" "The coffee at Eastfield is terrible," he said. He heard her laugh. A real one, quick, startled, and completely unguarded. The kind of laugh he had heard from Chloe in the kitchen, the kind you couldn't perform. "I'll send a machine," she said. "Don't," he said. "Buy it through a local vendor. Someone in the Eastfield neighborhood. If we're running a workforce development program in that community, our coffee should come from that community." A long pause. "That's going in the board presentation," she said. "It shouldn't be in a board presentation," he said. "It should just happen." Another pause. "Longer. I'll be back Wednesday," she said. "I'll be here," he said. Robert. Her voice shifted. Just slightly. "Thank you. For going today. For not waiting to be told." "That's the job," he said. "No," she said quietly. "That's you." He didn't argue with that. He stepped off the elevator into the parking garage and walked to his car, and he sat for a moment, in the familiar stillness he always found at the end of a day where something real had happened. He called Chloe. She picked up on the second ring. "Well," she said without preamble. "Good day," he said. "Tell me everything." "I went to a community center in Eastfield," he said. "I drank bad coffee. I helped a guy named Gerald practice his handshake. I found out that the training schedule doesn't work for people who take buses." "And you're going to fix it?" "Already started." A pause. "Dad, yeah. Is this the thing?" she said. "Like, is this the actual thing? The thing where everything gets better?" He thought about Eastfield. He thought about Renata's face recalibrating. He thought about Gerald shaking his hand at the end of the session firm. Steady, exactly right, and saying, "I think I've got it." He thought about a woman laughing in a Chicago hotel room because he had told her to buy local coffee. He thought about the calendar on the refrigerator, and the red circle, and all the mornings that had come before this one. "Yeah, baby," he said. "I think this is the thing." She made a sound on the other end of the line that was half exhale and half something he didn't have a name for. Relief, maybe. Or the specific uncomplicated joy of a child who has watched a parent fight for something. And finally seen them get close enough to touch it. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," he said. "Come home," she said. "I made dinner." He started the car. "What'd you make?" "Pasta," she said. "I followed the recipe this time." "Last time you followed the recipe." "Last time I followed a different recipe," she said. "This one is specifically the right one." "Diana texted me a link." He stopped. "Diana texted you," he said. "She texted me the day you signed the offer letter," Chloe said, completely without embarrassment. She said, and I quote, "Your dad is going to be too busy his first week to cook. Here are 3 recipes that are hard to mess up. Congratulations. She's very efficient." He sat in the parking garage and stared at the steering wheel. He thought about the world being full of people who were quietly, consistently good, in ways that nobody put in a report or listed in a quarterly presentation, and how the entire fragile architecture of a decent life was built on those people showing up in the right moments, without being asked. "Tell Diana thank you," he said. "Already did," Chloe said. "Come home, Dad." He pulled out of the garage and into the evening traffic, and the city came up around him, in the particular way it did, at the end of a day, when you had actually done something, full and loud and indifferent as ever, but feeling somehow, for the first time in a very long time, like a place that had room for him in it. Wednesday came the way important days always came for Robert Calloway, quietly, without announcement, dressed in the same gray morning light as every other day. He was at his desk at 7:40, which was his desk now, in a way that still felt slightly foreign. The way anything feels when you have spent years believing you would never occupy it. The office was small by Ashford Enterprises standards. He had specifically requested the smaller one, at the end of the community ops corridor, rather than the larger corner office that the previous 2 directors had used. Diana had looked at him when he said this, and written it down without comment, which was her way of saying she understood exactly why, and approved completely. He had been at the company for 9 days. In 9 days he had visited 4 of the 14 community sites. He had revised the transit schedule at Eastfield and 3 other locations to align with actual bus routes, a change that required exactly 1 email and 1 phone call, and which Diana had executed within 24 hours. He had sat in on 11 team meetings and led none of them, because he was still learning what was actually happening before he started talking about changing it. He had found in those 9 days that the community ops team was not broken. It was undernourished. There was real talent in that group, people who had been working hard and thinking clearly and running into the same systemic walls for long enough that some of them had started to mistake the walls for permanent features of the landscape. His job, as he had come to understand it, was not to redesign the system. It was to remove the walls that had convinced good people their work didn't matter. He was deep in the Eastfield program data when Diana knocked twice and opened the door. "She's back," Diana said. He looked up. "She land okay?" he said. "She landed an hour ago," Diana said. "She's downstairs." A pause. "And she has Harper with her." He put his pen down. "School's out this week," Diana said. "Harper asked to come see where Mommy worked." Vivian said yes. A smaller pause. "Harper specifically asked if you would be here." He was quiet for a moment. "Tell her I'm here," he said. He heard them before he saw them. The elevator opened at the end of the corridor, and he heard Vivian's voice, professional and warm, and underneath it a smaller voice, asking questions at a rate that suggested the questioner had stored them up for them the entire flight from Chicago. "But why is it called community operations? What's a community operation? Is it like a surgery? Why do they call it operations if nobody's getting operated on?" "Because it means we're making things run," Vivian said. "Like a machine? Like a community. That's the same word you started with. Harper. I'm just saying." He was standing in the doorway of his office when they came around the corner. Vivian saw him first. Something in her face shifted, not dramatically. Just the particular small shift of a person arriving somewhere they had been moving toward without fully admitting it. Then Harper saw him. He had not known what to expect. Children's memories were not reliable archives. She had been 5 years old and terrified, and it had been 6 weeks. He had told himself not to assume she would recognize him, not to build anything around a child's recollection of a frightening morning. Harper Ashford stopped walking. She stared at him. And then she did something that cut straight through every careful assumption he had made. She ran. Not toward him tentatively. Not with the cautious approach of a child who was unsure. She ran the way children run toward something they have been waiting for, without reservation, without calculation, with everything. He crouched down instinctively, the way he did with Chloe, the way his body knew to do, and she hit him, like a small, determined force of nature. Both arms around his neck, and held on. He held on back. He heard Vivian make a sound behind her daughter. A small, involuntary sound, the kind that escapes before you have the chance to contain it. "You're here," Harper said into his shoulder. "I'm here," he said. "You work here now?" "I do." She pulled back and looked at him with enormous, serious brown eyes. She looked exactly as he remembered her, the gold bracelet still on her left wrist. The same deliberate expression of a child who processed the world with considerable gravity. "Mom said you help people," Harper said. "That's the job," he said. "Is that why you stopped your car?" she said. "On the road? Because it's your job to help people?" He looked at her. "No," he said. "I stopped because you needed someone. That's a different thing." She thought about this with visible seriousness. "What's the difference?" she said. "A job is something you do because someone's paying you to do it," he said. "What I did on Route 7, nobody was paying me. I just didn't want you to be alone." Harper absorbed this with the focused attention of a child who was going to remember it. "Okay," she said, like she had filed it away, like it was now part of her permanent record of how the world worked. She took his hand exactly the same way she had taken it in the car, natural and immediate and completely without hesitation, and said, "Can I see your office?" He stood, her hand still in his, and looked at Vivian. Vivian was looking at their joined hands. Her expression was the kind that people wore when they were watching something they had hoped for and had not let themselves believe would actually happen. "If it's okay with your mom," he said. "It's okay," Vivian said, and her voice was a fraction lower than usual. He showed Harper his office. She examined everything with the systematic attention of a small inspector. She looked at the files. She asked what the whiteboard was for. She noticed immediately that there was no drawing on the corkboard, which she found unacceptable. "Every office needs a drawing," she said. "That right?" he said. "Mom has one. Diana has one. You should have one." "I just started," he said. "Still," she said. She found a marker on his desk, one of the dry erase markers for the whiteboard, and she looked at him. "Can I?" she said. He looked at the blank corkboard on his wall. He thought about the drawing in Vivian's office. The figure with enormous arms. The man who stayed. He took a piece of paper from his desk and gave it to her. She sat on the floor, just sat down cross-legged on the floor of his office without ceremony, and drew for 4 minutes, with her tongue between her teeth and the focused intensity of someone producing something important. He stood in his office doorway and talked to Vivian. "Chicago," he said. "Done," she said. "Signed yesterday morning." A pause. "How are the sites?" "I'll have the full report Friday," he said. "Short version, the teams are good. The problems are structural, not personal. We can fix." Nodded. "Then, you changed the transit schedule." 4 sites, he said. "Same fix, different specifics. Attendance at the morning sessions is up 18% in 2 days." She stared at him. 2 days, she said. "People were showing up late because the session started before the second bus of the morning," he said. "We moved the start time 45 minutes. Attendance went up." "That's it," she said. 45 minutes? 45 minutes. And someone who bothered to check the bus schedule," he said. She pressed her lips together, not frustrated, something more like the controlled expression of a person absorbing the specific cost of a simple thing that should have been done a long time ago and wasn't. "The previous directors," she started, "never went to the sites before the 3rd month," he said. "Not accusatory, just factual." She looked at him. "I should have caught that," she said. "I've said that to myself every day this week." "Vivian," he said. And it was the first time he had used her first name directly, without the formal buffer of Ms. Ashford, and she noticed he could see her notice. You're running a company with 14,000 employees across 9 states. You cannot also run 14 community sites. That's why the role exists. I know, she said, but I hired the wrong people for it twice. You hired people who looked right, he said. That's different from hiring wrong. She looked at him for a moment. Are you always this reasonable, she said. No, he said. I'm reasonable about other people's mistakes. I'm very hard on my own. She almost smiled. Done, Harper announced. They both looked down. Harper was standing up, holding out the paper with both hands like an offering. Robert took it. It was a figure, drawn in thick marker lines with the complete confidence of a child who had not yet learned to doubt her own artistic judgment. The figure was standing upright, arms slightly out, wearing what was clearly meant to be a blue jacket. At the top, in large careful letters, Robert, and at the bottom, in the same hand, a second line she had clearly added as an afterthought. Slightly smaller, he came back. He looked at the drawing. He looked at it for a long time. Harper was watching him with those serious brown eyes, waiting for his verdict. This, he said carefully, is the best thing on any wall in this building. She nodded. Satisfied. I know, she said. He pinned it to the corkboard. It stayed there. 3 months passed. They passed the way good months passed, when you were doing work that actually mattered, fast and full, and slightly disorienting, because you kept looking up and finding you had moved further than you realized. Robert restructured the Community Ops division from the ground up. Not all at once. Not dramatically. He did it the way he did everything, systematically. From observation rather than assumption, changing what was actually wrong and leaving what was actually working exactly where it was. He visited every one of the 14 sites before he changed anything at any of them. He talked to Renata equivalents at each location, the front desk people, the program assistants, the participants themselves, and he built his understanding of each site from those conversations outward, not from the reports inward. What he found consistently was the same thing he had found at Eastfield: good people running good programs inside systems that had been designed by people who had never sat in the room where the programs actually happened. He fixed the systems. Attendance across the network was up 31% by the end of month 2. Job placement rates, the number that actually mattered, the number that the previous leadership had quietly stopped leading with, rose from 42% to 67% by month 3. Not because Robert had introduced revolutionary methodology, because he had asked the participants what was working and what wasn't, and then actually changed the things that weren't. He also did something that had not been in the job description. He started a direct feedback channel, a simple low-tech thing, just a dedicated email address and a phone number staffed by rotating team members through which participants at any site could reach the Community Ops division directly with concerns, suggestions, or problems. The idea had come from Gerald, the man he had helped with his handshake on his first morning at Eastfield. Gerald had gotten the job he'd been interviewing for. He had come back to the program 2 weeks later as a volunteer coach for other participants, and during one of Robert's visits he had pulled him aside and said, "The one thing that would have helped me most was knowing that if I needed something, I could ask someone who could actually do something about it." Robert had written the phone number on a whiteboard that afternoon. Diana had set up the infrastructure by the following Monday. Vivian found out about it when the board presentation came around at the end of month 3. She was reviewing the supplementary materials Diana had compiled, and she stopped at one particular page. "Tell me about the feedback channel," she said. They were in her office, late afternoon, the kind of meeting that had become routine and somehow never felt routine. Because Vivian Ashford was a person who was incapable of having a conversation she wasn't fully present in. "Participant suggestion," he said. "Gerald," she said, because she had read everything. "Gerald," he confirmed. "He's now a volunteer coach at 3 sites. He's good at it," Robert said. "Better than some of the paid staff." A pause. She was quiet in the particular way she got quiet when she was thinking about something larger than the immediate conversation. "I want to talk about something," she said. "Okay," he said. "The board is going to look at these numbers next week," she said. 31% attendance increase. 67% placement rate. The feedback channel. The transit adjustments. She set the papers down. They're going to want to know what changed. Tell them what changed, he said. I want to know how you want it framed, she said. He looked at her. Frame it accurately. Someone went to the sites and paid attention to what was actually happening and made the adjustments that the data indicated. They're going to ask who. Tell them, he said. She looked at him carefully. Some of them are going to make assumptions about how you came to be here. They know about Route 7. I know, he said. It might be uncomfortable, she said. I've been uncomfortable before, he said, Robert. Her voice was level, but underneath it was something more careful. I want to protect you from the narrative that reduces what you've done here to a feel-good story about the man who saved the CEO's daughter. He was quiet, because that's not what this is, she said. And you deserve for that to be clear. He looked at her for a long moment. Vivian, he said. The only thing that matters is whether the programs are working, whether Gerald got his job, whether Marissa can get to the morning session on time, whether Renata has someone she can call when something needs fixing. He paused. The board can tell whatever story they want about how I got here. The numbers will tell the true story. Numbers don't care about narrative. She looked at him. Has anyone ever told you, she said carefully, that you are one of the most difficult people to do something nice for? Chloe tells me that regularly, he said. She laughed. The real one. The quick, unguarded one that he had heard for the first time in a Chicago phone call, and had since come to understand was the truest sound in the room when it appeared. The board presentation was on a Thursday. Robert was not in the boardroom for it. He was at the Millbrook site, the one he had visited last, and which had the most complex structural problems, sitting in on a job readiness session with 12 participants, listening to a career counselor named Theo walk them through interview techniques with the kind of patient, precise attention that Robert had been quietly advocating for across the entire network. His phone buzzed once during the session. He glanced at it under the table. A text from Diana. Standing ovation. Literally. Board asked if there were more people like you. Vivian said she was working on it. More later. He put his phone back in his pocket. Theo was demonstrating a handshake. Robert watched. The thing that had happened in that boardroom would matter. The numbers would open doors. The board's approval would mean more resources, more sites, more capacity to do the thing he had come here to do. All of that was real and important, and he was not indifferent to it. But the thing happening in this room right now was also real. A man named Theo was showing 12 people that they were worth preparing for, that their first impression mattered, that someone had taken the time to think about how to give them the best possible chance. That was the work. Everything else was infrastructure for the work. He stayed for the full session. On a Friday evening, 6 weeks after the board presentation, Vivian knocked on his office door at 6:15. He was still at his desk, which she had stopped being surprised by. Harper was with her because Vivian had started bringing her on occasional late afternoons when school was done and the meetings were finished and the building had gone quiet enough to be more person than institution. Harper went directly to the corkboard and inspected her drawing with the proprietary satisfaction of an artist reviewing her installed work. It was still there, exactly where Robert had pinned it on her first visit. He had not moved it. He had not added anything next to it. It was the only thing on that board, which was a choice that Harper had noticed and approved of without comment. You're still here, Vivian said. Still working, he said. It's Friday at 6:15, she said. The Millbrook restructure has a timeline question I want to resolve before Monday, he said. She sat down in the chair across from his desk, not the formal visitor's chair. The other one, the one that had gradually migrated to a particular angle in the room over the past weeks, that was more conversation than meeting. Can I ask you something, she said. Yes, he said. Do you ever stop? He considered this seriously. Define stop, he said. Stop working, she said. Stop solving. Stop seeing the problem in every room and moving toward it. He thought about it. Not really, he said. But it doesn't feel like not stopping. It just feels like paying attention. She looked at him. Is that what you taught Chloe? She said. To pay attention like that? I think she came with it, he said. I just didn't discourage it. Vivian was quiet for a moment. The particular quiet that meant she was holding something. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay," he said. "I had dinner with my board chair last week," she said. "Walter Fenn. He's been on the board for 9 years. He's a person who has seen a very large number of people come through this company." She paused. "He told me that in 9 years, he has seen two kinds of leaders in this organization. People who made the company look better, and people who actually made it better." She held his gaze. He said, "You're the second kind." He said it was obvious by the second board presentation. He said he wanted me to make sure you knew that. Robert said nothing. "I'm telling you," Vivian said, "because you won't ask. And because you need to hear it from someone who has no stake in telling you, which Walter absolutely does not." He looked at his desk for a moment. He thought about the warehouse. He thought about the calendar on the refrigerator. He thought about Dolores pressing the folder of his notes to her chest. He thought about Chloe asking, "Dad, what's there to think about?" "Thank you," he said. Just that. Just 2 words, plain and direct, the way he said everything. Vivian nodded. "Robert," she said. He looked up. "I owe you something," she said. "And I don't mean the job. I mean something different." He waited. "I was not a good person to work for," she said. "Before Route 7. I was effective and I was results-driven, and I was present in every room, but I was not." She stopped. She started again. "I had built something very large by treating people as parts of the machine, not cruelly. I was never cruel, but without really seeing them. The way you see people." A pause. "Watching you work this quarter has been the most useful professional education I have had in 11 years of running this company." He looked at her. "Harper draws pictures of you," she said. "She's drawn 17 of them. I counted. I'm not sure whether that says more about you or about my inability to stop counting things." A breath. "But she talks about you, the way kids talk about people who showed them something true about the world. And she was 5. She didn't have language for it yet. She just knew that when everything was wrong and frightening and she couldn't see a way out, someone came and stayed and didn't let go." The office was very quiet. "You changed something in her," Vivian said. "About how she thinks people work. About what to expect from them." She looked at him directly. "And you changed something in me." He was very still. "I don't know how to do what you do," she said. "I'm working on it. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on it because of you. Not the accident. Not the story. Because of watching you show up every day and pay attention and care about Gerald's handshake, and Marissa's bus schedule, and Renata's 3 years at the front desk." She paused. "You make people feel like they matter." And I had forgotten. Somewhere in the last 11 years, how much that costs and how much it returns. Harper, across the room, had apparently produced another marker from somewhere and was adding something to the paper on the corkboard. Neither adult addressed this, it seemed, somehow, like the right thing to let happen. Robert looked at Vivian Ashford and thought about the morning on Route 7. He thought about the 45 minutes of buffer he had built into his morning, and the interview he had not made, and the 4 minutes in the smoke and the math on the refrigerator calendar, and all of it, the whole accumulated weight of a year that had broken him open without breaking him. He thought about what it meant to be seen. Not recognized. Not rewarded. Seen. The actual experience of having someone look at the specific thing you were doing and understand, without explanation or credential, what it cost and why you did it anyway. He had spent 41 years being reliable, being steady, being the man who showed up, who fixed the thing, who stayed after the dust settled. He had done it for Chloe, and for Dolores, and for Gerald, and for a 5-year-old girl in a gold bracelet who had needed someone in 4 minutes of her life. He had not done it to be seen. But being seen, he was learning, was not the same as being rewarded. Being seen was just someone else finally telling the truth about what they observed. And the truth, when it arrived late, and this clearly, had a particular quality to it, not sentimental, not dramatic, just solid, the way true things were solid, the way foundations were solid. "Harper," he said. "Yep," she said, still working on the corkboard. "What are you adding to the drawing?" he said. She stepped back and looked at it critically. Then she turned and showed him. She had added a second figure next to the original one. Smaller, with wild hair going in 3 directions. "That's Chloe," Harper said. "Because she helped too. Even if she wasn't there." You told me you were brave because of her. She looked at him. Right? He stared at the drawing. Yeah, he said. His voice came out lower than intended. That's right. So she should be in the picture, Harper said, with the complete, irrefutable logic of a 6-year-old. He looked at the drawing on the corkboard. The man in the blue jacket, labeled Robert, and now beside him, a smaller figure with impossible hair, unlabeled, but present. He came back. That was what it said at the bottom. He came back. He thought, I came back because I had somewhere to come back to. Because a child with dark eyes and impossible hair had looked at me at 5 a.m. and said, come home with good news. Because Dolores had pressed a folder of notes against her chest, like it was worth something. Because Gerald shook a hand exactly right and came back to teach others how. Because Renata had waited 3 years for someone to show up and actually listen. He had not saved Vivian Ashford on Route 7. He had saved Harper. But he was beginning to understand that the things you did for one person had a way of moving outward in directions you couldn't track, touching people you would never meet, changing you would never see changed, in the specific and uncountable way that decency moved through the world when you let it. He had not been trying to change anything on that morning. He had been trying to get to an interview. He had been trying to secure a promotion that would pay for his daughter's medical treatments. He had been trying, as he was always trying, to move the math from impossible toward manageable. He had stopped because a child was afraid. That was the whole story. Everything else was what happened because of it. He looked at Vivian. The Millbrook timeline question, he said. I figured it out. She looked at him. A beat. Then she laughed the real one, quick and unguarded. Of course you did, she said. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes, she said. That first meeting, he said. When you asked me why I saved you. She went still. And I said I didn't save you, he said. That I saved Harper. I remember, she said quietly. I want you to know that wasn't a correction, he said. I just meant I didn't go to that car thinking about anyone's status. I went because she was there, and she needed someone. He paused. But if I had known it was you in the driver's seat. If I had known who Harper was. What your name was. Any of it. He looked at her steadily. I still would have run. The words sat between them in the quiet office at 6:15 on a Friday evening, with Harper adding details to a drawing on a corkboard and the city moving on outside. Indifferent as ever, and Vivian Ashford looked at Robert Calloway with an expression that had no name in the professional vocabulary she had spent 11 years building, because it was not a professional feeling. It was the feeling of being told something that made the world make sense again. I know, she said. That's why it mattered. Chloe's treatment the following week went smoothly, as it had gone smoothly every month since the benefits activated. The clinic nurse, who had seen Robert in that waiting room through enough difficult years to know the difference, looked at his face as he signed in and said, You look different. Good different or bad different? He said. She smiled. Good. She said, definitely good. He sat in the waiting room. He did not read the magazines. He sat with his hands in his lap and thought about nothing in particular, which was something he had not been able to do in a waiting room for a very long time. Because there had always been math to do, always a gap to calculate, always a next crisis assembling itself just past the horizon. The math was different now. The calendar still had circles on it, but they were not red anymore, and they did not fill him with the particular cold dread of a man who knows the number on the left is larger than the number on the right. Chloe came out of the treatment room, wearing the same expression she always wore afterward, slightly tired, entirely unbothered, visibly impatient to get back to her day. Done, she said. How do you feel? Fine, she said. The way she always said it. Same as always. Can we get lunch? I want Thai food. It's 10:30, he said. Thai food exists in the morning, she said. Don't be narrow-minded. He stood. They walked out of the clinic together into the morning air, his daughter's shoulder against his arm, the city opening up around them. And Robert Calloway felt cleanly, completely, without the shadow of the math or the calendar or the 47-minute alarm that the thing he had been moving toward through all of it, through every early morning and every late-night delivery shift and every calculation made at a kitchen table after a child had gone to sleep, was not a job or a salary or a position on the 23rd floor of a glass tower. It was this. Right here. His daughter walking beside him with her whole life still ahead of her, and enough room finally, enough air and enough certainty, to let himself believe it was going to be okay. He had stopped a car on Route 7 for 4 minutes. He had lost a job. He had sat in the dark and done the math. He had walked into a building that felt like it belonged to a different world. He had told the truth. And the truth, it turned out, had been enough. Not because the world rewarded honest men, he knew better than to believe that, had known it for 41 years, but because one woman had been paying attention on the right day, and she had seen what he was, and she had called it by its actual name. Robert Calloway was not a hero. He was something quieter than that, and more durable. A man who showed up, who stayed, who paid attention, who ran toward the thing everyone else was watching from a safe distance, and who had taught his daughter, without ever sitting her down to do it, that this was simply what people were supposed to do for each other. He had not saved Vivian Ashford. But somewhere in the movement of those 4 minutes on Route 7, in the holding of a small hand and the making of a frightened child laugh, he had reminded a woman who had forgotten it that humanity was worth more than everything she had built, and in doing so, had given her back the thing that made all of it worth building in the first place. Harper's drawing was still on the corkboard on the 23rd floor. It would still be there on Monday morning when he walked in at 7:40 and sat down at his and started paying attention again. Robert, the man in the blue jacket, arms out. Standing, he came back. He always did.